Enchanter here, and this week I wanna show you guys the demo of Tumor Necrosis Factor Amen, a game that perfectly encapsulates what I love about small independent creators. The ability to lock into an uncompromising vision without the constant need to dilute it to broaden their audience. This game knows what it is, and you can take it or leave it. So what is it then? It's a post-apocalyptic light gun shooter with a very unsettling somber tone. Imagine a cross between House of the Dead and Baroque. The story starts off a bit generic. Everything was fine until the Shepherd Biosciences Corporation, in their ambition and hubris, decided to mess around with powers beyond their comprehension and unleashed the apocalypse, this time in the form of all-consuming parasitic nematodes. What few survivors there are now gather around a massive tower in the hopes of a rapture that would make things right again, and your mutant wormy ass might be the one to either save the world or doom it for all eternity. We've seen that setup 1,000 times before, and Baroque is a prime example of that actually, but in storytelling, the presentation is just as important as the story itself, and that's where Tumor Necrosis Factor shines. From the nonsensical title and grotesque enemies to that weird combination of highly detailed characters and low-poly environments that defined much of the PlayStation 2 era and the morbid twist on Christian imagery, TNF Amen builds this supernatural nightmare feel of an atmosphere that's not quite horror since you are easily capable of fighting off the wormy hordes, but still bizarre and disgusting. And the voice acting, sparse as it may be, sounds all distorted in this dreamy, half-hallucinatory way, doing wonders to enhance the experience.
Plants, animals, angels, it doesn't care. It is like the utterly evolved. Science made miracle.
In the nematode apocalypse, everything is worms. You're a worm, and except for these guys, all your enemies are also worms. Zombie worms, mosquito worms, sheep worms, wormy worms, angel worms, off-brand air beer worms, and even a goddamn oversized burger worm. There's this mixture of blood and slime everywhere, from floor to ceiling and everything in between. Everything is pulsating, wiggling or undulating in a disconcerting manner, and it's really not for everyone, but if you're the kind of person who enjoys these kinds of flashy, supernatural, organic vistas, you'll feel right at home. Plus, I have a soft spot for games that take religious themes and go bonkers with them. The idea of humanity unleashing a creature so vile, even angels can't fully resist its corrupting influence, and God himself is either unable or unwilling to intervene directly, makes for a much more hardcore, hopeless tone than just going, "Look, Umbrella's BOWs are on the loose again. Time to out-hand some Leon and Rinse Rock Puncher. Oh, and get to the nuclear shelter before they bomb the whole place, I guess." It brings with it the potential for all sorts of fantastic, otherworldly happenings that would feel out of place otherwise. As an aside, there's a censorship mode that I think they put in as a joke, where choosing to activate it causes the main character to rip off his own breast, exposing the bones underneath. I'm pretty sure that's the only difference in the whole demo, and I just find the possibility that someone would come into a game named Tumor Necrosis Factor Amen, see all of the gore and the violence, only to decide to complain about a harmless pixelated nipple instead. Hilarious, and yet all too real. In terms of gameplay, it's pretty much what you expect from a light gun shooter. Your character moves on his own, enemies show up in front of the camera, you whip them to death with your wormy appendages, and then move on to the next combat screen, while occasionally reaching decision points where you unlock alternate paths to go through. There's a combo system that increases the amount of consecutive whippings you can give your enemies before needing to reload your tail, and every enemy has at least one clearly marked weak spot that you can hit for massive damage. Some of them shoot ranged projectiles that you can intercept by whipping them before they reach you, and interestingly, some of them are actually inaccurate as hell, meaning you can just ignore their bullets since they're unlikely to hit you anyway. So, gameplay-wise, it's honestly a bit unremarkable. The boss at the end of the demo had a more challenging pattern that was fun to learn, but there was very little in terms of varying enemy behavior, different weapons, environmental hazards, power-ups and the like. Now, of course, the demo version only has the tutorial and the first level, so hopefully things can get easier later on, but as it stands, Tumor Necrosis Factor feels like the sort of game I'd play through once just to soak in the atmosphere and story, instead of a highly replayable arcade game that I'd love to go through over and over again to improve my high score. And that brings us to an issue that I have with PC light gun games in general. The whole point of playing light gun shooters is to use a light gun to shoot your way through the game, and clicking with a mouse just doesn't feel that satisfying. Of course, there are some modern PC-compatible light guns out there, except they're freaking expensive and not something you'd have lying around unless you're way into these kinds of games. But if you own a gyroscope-capable controller like the PS5's DualSense, the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons, or any number of third-party offerings that have popped up over the years, you can use Gyroscopic aiming instead, and I highly recommend you give it a try. It's still not the same as using a gun-shaped IR emitter to blast enemies on the screen, but it's as close as I could get with what I have on hand, and it felt like a significant improvement. Do note that Steam Input refused to work correctly with TNF Amen, at least for me, so you might have to add the demo as a non-Steam game to fix it. Afterwards, it's a simple process to calibrate your gyros and set Steam to recognize it as a mouse, but you might have to experiment a bit with the sensitivity settings until the controls feel natural. I found my personal sweet spot to be 5 times sensitivity and setting the dead zone to 0, but your mileage may vary depending on your controller, monitor and personal preference. Speaking of monitors, you might have noticed this video is in standard 16:9 instead of my usual 21:9 aspect ratio, and that's because I just couldn't find any way of making TNF Amen work in ultrawide. Now, usually, I'd criticize the game for lacking ultrawide support, but light gun shooters are one of those genres where increasing the player's field of view can significantly impact game balance, since so much of the experience is predicated on keeping tight control over what the player can and cannot see at all times. Of course, I'd love it if the developer added ultrawide support in the future, but knowing how much extra work it would be to rebalance the game with ultrawide monitors in mind, I understand why they wouldn't. Something that I most definitely can criticize TNF Amen for is the fact that it lacks a settings menu altogether. I can excuse the lack of graphical options since it's such a light game, but it has literally no settings at all. Nothing. No resolution options, no mouse sensitivity options, no audio sliders, just a button to start the game and another to exit. And let me tell you, this game is in urgent need of a built-in FPS limiter. When I'm on the main menu, my GPU use shoots up to 100%, all for the sake of rendering that floating nematode guy at over 1000 FPS for no reason other than heating up my room in the height of summer. In-game, the frame rate drops to a far more acceptable 160 to 180 FPS, but even then, I'd much rather lock it at a smooth 120. Thankfully, there's a bunch of other software I can use to deal with this, but I just don't understand why a Unity game would simply refuse to make those options available to the player in the first place. So, to sum it all up, the Tumor Necrosis Factor Amen demo is somewhat bare bones in terms of gameplay mechanics, but the twisted world, the gross enemy designs, and the cryptic, post-apocalyptic, quasi-religious story are right up my alley, and I definitely intend to play through the full game when it releases. If any of this sounds interesting to you, check out the links in the description for the game's Steam and itch.io pages where you can download the demo for free. Anyway, that's enough from me for now. That was a quick review of Tumor Necrosis Factor Amen demo by the developer ChickenHat. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, feedback is welcome. See you in the next video, bye bye!